सेव किया था ना?
मैं सिर्फ इसलिए गया था क्योंकि उसने मुझे कॉल किया, that's it. But listen तो.
Save it for someone else.
जिंदगी में सेव करना जरूरी है, मगर जब बात पैसों की हो, सिर्फ सेविंग से काम नहीं चलेगा। इक्विटी म्यूचुअल फंड्स में इन्वेस्ट कीजिए और अपने सेविंग्स को आगे बढ़ने का मौका दीजिए।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
The big G20 summit in Bali, which made more headlines actually with what happened on the sidelines, like that Trudeau-Xi encounter. We talked about it in Cut the Clutter just yesterday. That is over. The baton is now passed from Indonesia's Joko Widodo to India's Narendra Modi. It sets the stage also for a never-before foreign affairs year for India. Now you might say India has been holding NAM summits and all in the past. Those were big occasions, but those were clubs of a different type. This is the elite of the elite. G20 accounts for 80% of the world's GDP and 75% of the world's trade. And now the important thing especially is that India will be hosting so much of the world. I told you how much of the economy and trade under a leader who revels in grand spectacle. L.K. Advani spoke brave but indiscreet words or reckless words once, calling Narendra Modi a good event manager, and has been paying for it since then. Every birthday of his becomes an event only when Narendra Modi arrives and cameras find that one visual they want. This year-long spectacle will be no ordinary event. It will set up Narendra Modi's 2024 election campaign brilliantly for him. It will bring the most prominent faces from the world to India. They will all perforce be heaping high praise on India and its leader. In the year, nearly 100 meetings will be held, culminating in a summit. Meetings will be taken to cities across the country. There will be much hugging, laughter, and the glitziest packaging of the quote-unquote Vishwaguru. This so neatly dovetails into the general election campaign that it will be tempting to dismiss it as another tamasha mostly directed at domestic audience and domestic politics. There are many good reasons, however, why we should avoid that temptation, take off our political goggles and put them away for a bit. We might then be able to appreciate how vital a foreign and strategic affairs opportunity this is for India. 3 decades after the vaporization of the Soviet Empire created a couple of years of instability in the global balance of power, another such flux has arrived, thanks largely to Vladimir Putin, but partly also to Xi Jinping. The post-Soviet world settled into a new unipolar arrangement that lasted a quarter of a century, until a rising China began to challenge it. This change was helped along by the notion of declining American power. First with Obama's idea of leading from behind, then with Donald Trump's retreat from globalization, and finally the humiliating Biden withdrawal from Afghanistan. If the world had remained frozen like that, as it was, say, until the beginning of 2022 or until the beginning of this year, this G20 wouldn't have had a fraction of the oomph for sex appeal it has today. Let's list some dramatic changes. Number 1, far from continuing to decline, American power has made a turnaround. It is rising again. Its economy, although beset with inflation and other challenges, is healthier than the rest of the developed world. Look at Europe, Britain, for example. And it is recovering. Its often bumbling leader, President Biden, has turned in a surprising performance in the midterm, surprising for friend and foe. And just a year after losing out a war of tribal insurgency to the Taliban, it is winning a real one with tanks, guns, artillery, rockets, aircraft, ships, submarines. This is in Ukraine, and in this case, the enemy is a former superpower which also happens to be the most valuable ally of the aspiring new superpower, namely China. Most importantly, America is winning without having to employ any military personnel directly or suffering any casualties, which might indeed be the reason it is winning. See the history of America's or any other bigger powers' wars overseas. It loses, a bigger power loses when it sends its troops to fight someone else's wars. Vietnam, Iraq, elsewhere in the Middle East, and Afghanistan the second time are good examples. America lost all these wars. It put boots on the ground, troops on the ground, lost lives, but lost the wars also. Closer home, India lost to merely lightly armed irregulars in Sri Lanka. But America won the first time in Afghanistan because the natives were fighting. The Mujahideen who were fighting the Soviets were locals, as is the situation in Ukraine now. The Ukrainians are fighting for their nation. You are on the winning side when the people you are backing are willing to fight for their nations, which is precisely why India liberated Bangladesh in just 13 days. For Biden and the US, Zelensky's Ukrainians have now erased the blot of Kabul, if by employing weaponry gifted to them by the Western powers. Next point, Russia is losing its war militarily, diplomatically, and politically. I am sobered by the vast popular support for Putin in India and the deep residual nostalgia for the Soviet Union, which translates into a self-created mythology that Russia is just a new name for old USSR. It is the virtuous side in the contest, even a victim. You find people, even well-informed people who say, oh, but Zelensky has been put up by the West, so it's actually West fighting Putin, it isn't Putin's fault. NATO was expanding, etc., etc. Now, you can believe in all that, but hard luck if after 9 months of fighting, your side, that is Putin's Russia, is retreating on an entire 800-kilometer front against an enemy a fraction your size. So let me give you the bad news, your side is losing. Whatever the internal politics in Moscow, this will leave a much weaker Russia and an enormously weaker Putin. It will be good for India because like Russia becoming a China ally, remember the joint declaration they passed just before the Russians went into Ukraine when they said they had a limitless alliance and partnership which would be hindered by nothing. So just like Russia becoming a China ally and flirting with Pakistan, India has also been widening its strategic choices. On armaments, is systematic and systemic. Decoupling started some 5 years back and is now irreversible. Albeit slow, it's going slowly given the vast arsenal of legacy systems that we already have. We in India tend to plonk ourselves philosophically and funnily, also morally, on the losing side in distant wars. ये हमारा एक specialization है. We choose the losing side. And these are wars where we have zero leverage or zero ability to influence the outcome. In the first Afghan jihad, we wanted the Soviets to win, but they lost. In the second Afghan war, we were cheering the Americans and they were defeated. Now, in the more vocal public opinion, media, foreign policy, commentariat, and strategic community, there is this touching belief that the Russians are unbeatable. Of course, they are unbeatable, right? Isn't it? How can they be defeated by cheeky little Ukraine? Of course, the Russians haven't yet used their best weapons. What are they waiting for? I don't know, but don't ask me. Of course, they will eventually win. Now, sadly, here is the truth. We will end up on the losing side again. While the immediate risk to us is that we will look silly, stupid, and frozen in time, the Chinese see it differently. For them, it is serious trouble. Putin's blunder has dealt a body blow to China's rising power. It needed Russia. China needed Russia as an ally and a permanent source of cheap energy. A weakening Russia caught in a losing war punctures China's balloon, or Xi Jinping's balloon. To begin with, it's a huge blow to BRI. With repeated nuclear threats now, it is also an embarrassment globally. Look at it like this. All three of China's closest strategic allies, North Korea, Pakistan, and Russia, are the only nations in the world who are in the habit of flaunting nuclear threats. There is full revulsion for this everywhere. No support, no sympathy. Next point. Until about 5 years ago, conventional wisdom was that a rising China was overtaking a declining America, and they would do so, they'll finish the job latest by 2030. This has failed the test of time. This, for the Sinophiles, people who love China and adore China, this was optimism that has failed the test of time. It is today China that is struggling from growth from a much lower base than, say, America's. Its working age population is declining and it doesn't allow immigration to pad up its population or to bring in more working age population. Its working age population is declining by about 0.5% per year. Its growth is stalling. Debt burden is at crippling levels, and the big tech, fintech sector is in a crisis. It is worsened by the fact that Xi Jinping has gone systematically after his own country's biggest tech finance success stories, mostly to consolidate his own total power, if not out of the envy of their superstar founders as well. इस देश में एक ही हीरो हो सकता है, वो हीरो मैं हूँ, उसका नाम है शी जिनपिंग. She has brought back emphasis on state-owned enterprises, SOEs, or what we might call as PSUs, public sector undertakings in India. These are all steps that take China backwards, not forwards. Until 2014, so many experts in the world were saying China had probably already left the US behind on purchasing power parity basis, that is on the size of the total GDP. That never happened. Now all these experts are hiding or searching for excuses, as new calculations show this is not going to happen even by 2060. Likely it will never happen now. China's behavior is forcing the world to diversify their supply chains, decouple from China. A desperate warning on this was a part of Xi Jinping's sermon to Biden in Bali, as revealed in the Chinese Foreign Ministry's own readout of that meeting. But he can be sure nobody would listen to him. His arrogance, Xi's arrogance, has damaged the China story. Maybe not as badly as Putin ruined Russia's, but then he had an enormously bigger gross national power to play with, and that's why he had that much more to lose. To say that China is weakening will be an overstatement, but that it isn't strengthening anymore is enough to change the global balance of power. I've been writing and saying this for at least two decades now, since the first signs of Chinese getting impatient and flaunting their newfound power came up, particularly when they gave India trouble over Dalai Lama's visit in 2009 to Arunachal Pradesh, that the day the Chinese ratchet up trouble on their border with India, this will jolt all of the countries in China's front yard. And that's precisely what has happened. China is now, Xi Jinping's China has broken the belief that China's rise can be peaceful. Everybody is now waking up. Fumio Kishida, the Prime Minister of Japan, has talked about doubling his defense budget in the next 5 years, and you know how big Japan's defense budget is. So every country in China's neighborhood now sees China as trouble, if not a direct adversary. This has only weakened China's standing. If this set of changes drives the G20 year when India is in the chair, it is a lot of newly opened strategic space for Narendra Modi to play in. He has so far handled this deftly, balancing India's economic and strategic interests, playing US and Russia, and keeping China off his back. You can trust him to exploit this year-long opening to India's benefit and, of course, to his own in his election year. You can't grudge a politician that. And before I let you go, I have to make a pitch to you. And this is not a pitch about paid subscriptions to ThePrint. Although, of course, if you make those, I hope you do so. I'm not complaining. I'll be grateful on behalf of my colleagues. Please do that. But this is a pitch about something else and something really wonderful. So here I am telling you about a wonderful opportunity called the Teach for India Fellowship. Teach for India, as many of you perhaps know, is a movement to provide excellent education to children from low-income communities to help change their lives. It gives the fellows, that is Teach for India fellows, a chance to serve as full-time teachers and also cultivate their own leadership skills. The deadline for applications for the fellowship for 2023, that is next year, ends tomorrow, that is Sunday, November 20. Please visit the Teach for India website, www.teachforindia.org, to know more. You can all help build a better India. And you know what? Just to be sure, I know everybody is suspicious of everything right now. This is not a commercial. This is not an advertisement. This is not a commercial. This is an appeal in support for Teach for India from my heart.